All right, what is good, ladies and gentlemen, is the Master Reviewer back again with another review, and tonight we are doing a review for Antz. This is the very first DreamWorks film to ever release. It is a pseudo rewatch for me. I watched this like when I was really young. I remember, honestly, from what I remembered going into it, I did remember a lot of the beginning of the film, but the second half of the film was kind of a blank for me. Like, I didn't really remember what happened in the second half of this film. So yeah, it is a pseudo rewatch for me. And I did like it as a kid, so I was wondering how I was going to feel about it on rewatch, because it definitely has CGI that does age. And yeah, I was wondering just what I would think about it having liked it as a kid. I think maybe there was some nostalgia that played a role for it. But overall, yeah, we will get into it, starting off with the plot. So the plot of the film is that we follow Z, this worker ant. Basically, they're in this world which we're following, a world of ants. There is this colony of ants, and every ant is basically either a worker ant or a soldier ant, or there's like royal ants, I guess, that are neither. So Z is the main character. He is a worker ant, but he just doesn't really, he's like very individualistic, and he does not really like the whole thing of the whole like philosophy of the ant colony is that you as an individual doesn't matter, but like as a collective the ant colony matters, basically. But Z does not really like that kind of mindset, and he thinks that basically like he wants to like make his own kind of decisions. He doesn't really want to just like, he wants personally, like he doesn't want to just be part of the collective, basically. So he ends up meeting at the same time there is a royal ant queen. Her name is not queen, Princess Bala. She's not enjoying the royal life. Basically, she also kind of thinks that following orders and stuff is not really the best, and she kind of wants to make her own decisions. She doesn't want to end up marrying this General Mandible, who is the antagonist of the film. So she ends up going to a bar that Z is at. Z is there. He's not enjoying himself. Everyone else is dancing like in accordance with how they're supposed to be dancing, but Z doesn't want to participate, basically. So Princess Bala ends up asking him to dance, and so they do end up dancing together, and they have a good time because they're kind of like, they're not just following the same dance patterns as everyone else, and they're doing their own kind of thing. So they are having a good time, but they end up, I'm pretty sure, a fight ends up breaking out, and so Princess Bala, she ends up leaving. But Z now, he wants to once again meet her. So Z has a friend, Weaver, who is a soldier ant, and so by the way, before this happens, they were earlier on in a bar, like in the same bar that Z ended up dancing with Princess Bala. He ends up finding out about this place, Insectopia, I think that's what it's called, Insectopia, from this drunk raving guy at the bar. But yeah, that ended up being true later on in the film, but we'll get to that later. So Z ends up switching places with his friend Weaver to go be a soldier ant temporarily in order to be able to meet Princess Bala. So he ends up becoming a soldier, but he ends up getting drafted to fight a colony of termites. Basically, what's his name? Mandible, General Mandible, his whole goal is that he wants to create, he's basically he's a very much the strong should prosper, the weak should perish, eugenics kind of mentality. So he wants to first get rid of the loyalist soldiers of the queen, and then he wants to get rid of all of the worker ants because he views them as weaker in order to establish a more superior colony. Some Viltrumite philosophy kind of going on there, but anyway, so Z ends up going off into war to fight against termites. He ends up meeting this one soldier. I forgot his name. It's called like something with B. I can't remember at the moment, and I want to remember it, so give me a second here. Right, the ant's name is Barbatus, that Z ends up meeting, so they end up going to war. Z ends up falling into this hole for most of the war, and so he emerges with just pretty much every ant is dead, including Barbatus. And so he returns to the colony as a war hero. Mandible was not expecting him to return, but he does return. So yeah, he ends up managing to meet the queen and the princess, where he does reintroduce himself, basically, but then this ends up revealing the fact that the princess ended up going to the bar, which she wasn't supposed to. And so they also find out that this also leads to them finding out that Z is actually a worker ant that basically took up the role of a soldier, which is not allowed. So yeah, basically Z ends up taking the princess as a hostage, and they end up falling down a trash chute. So they end up outside of the anthill. At this point, a human is passing by using a magnifying glass, and so some guard ants that try to come retrieve the princess end up getting incinerated. And so at this point, you have Z and Princess Bala. They are isolated from the ant colony, and now Z's whole goal is that he wants to make it to Insectopia, and the princess just not being able to make it back to the ant colony on her own because of the dangers that are there. She ends up running into a praying mantis, I'm pretty sure, so she ends up going along with Z. And so they do travel to, they end up making it to, I think I might be skipping some details here and there, but they end up making it to Insectopia, basically. And actually, before they make it there, I think they go, there's like a picnic area that they end up at. They meet some, like this wasp couple, one of the female wasp ends up dying. So yeah, they end up getting stuck on like a piece of gum under a human shoe, and eventually they make it to Insectopia, where they're happy and stuff. They're having a good time with other bugs, all the free food. It's basically Insectopia. It's just like a trash can, like a trash pile, basically. So eventually you have, so everyone is now inspired by Z. Z, like the whole story of Z, the war hero, basically, how he kidnapped not the fact that he kidnapped the princess, the fact that he went from a worker to a soldier. He decided to become a soldier. Everyone like starts spreading rumors about Z being this very much this man of the people, this hero, basically. And there's like a lot of themes about like oppression, of how like the working class is like oppressed and stuff. And so everyone starts like talking about a revolution and how it's like we as the workers should seize the means of production and stuff. So very much like I think socialist. I'm not a ideological expert, but I'm pretty sure that like very much like socialist themes, I would say. So anyway, after that happens, basically there's this whole revolution that is being talked up about, but Mandible, he calms down the revolution by basically saying like, hey, okay, we'll give you, so like if you complete these tunnels, there'll be like more food for everyone, less work, and we'll even give you a day off on the ceremony for the commemorating the new tunnel, basically. So he also, Mandible ends up capturing Weevil, and there's also a friend of Z's, and the love interest of Weevil is, I didn't speak about her up until this point, her name is Azteca, something like that. So anyway, Mandible ends up capturing the two, and he beats up Weevil, but then he threatens to hurt Azteca, and so Weevil ends up telling him that, Z went to Insectopia, and so Mandible ends up sending his right-hand man, Cutter, to go retrieve the princess, and so he does that. Z ends up making it back to the colony with the help of the wasp that he met earlier, and so now his goal is just to save the princess. And so all the digger ants, they finish the tunnels, basically, or they're about to finish the tunnels. The whole goal of Mandible is that he wants them to finish the tunnels, which will lead to a nearby lake, which would cause, and he wants to trap all the worker ants in like the area of the commemoration ceremony in order to drown them, basically, get rid of like the weak and only the strong prevail. That's, again, his whole motivation. So Z arrives in time along with Princess Bala. Princess Bala, she breaks out of prison, and Z is like reunites with her. So they now go to, Princess Bala goes to like tell her mother, the queen, and Z goes to like tell the worker ants to stop digging and stuff, but it's too late at that point. They hit the point where the water starts breaking through, so the entire area starts flooding. And so this is like the final act of the film, basically, where all the ants, they start working together to create a ladder to reach the surface, and they do manage to do so, and they break through to the surface. Mandible is there. He's about to like send Z back down. He's going to send Z falling down, but at this point, Cutter steps in, punches Mandible, and because I think earlier Princess Bala inspired him, basically saying like, why do you only follow orders? It's like you should think for yourself, basically. And so at this point, and there were like hints of like him starting to like think for himself, where he did mention to Mandible, he said earlier, Cutter said to Mandible, he was like, hey, maybe we don't have to kill all the workers, they do a pretty good job, like I don't see the point of killing them. So yeah, eventually at this point he does end up standing up for himself and like the other worker ants by attacking Mandible, and so he helps up Z, but at this point Mandible attacks Z, so Mandible and Z fall down the hole. I think Mandible just falls to his death at that point, but Z fell into the water. All the other ants, they make it back up to the surface, and Cutter goes back down to retrieve Z. He makes it back up, and he didn't drown, so yeah, everyone's good and safe now. By the way, if I didn't mention up until this point, if you're confused on how Cutter was able to do all this, he is like specific ants that are able to fly, and he's like one of those ants that can fly. So yeah, everyone's good, everyone's safe and happy and stuff. Mandible's been defeated, all the worker ants are all safe and sound, And yeah, the movie basically ends with just a narration of Z, where he's basically talking about how he's good and happy, and he's like basically he ended up in the same place that he started. Like he mentioned like he and Bala, they're thinking of starting a family basically, and he also mentions how it's like he's like much happier now, but he's in the same position they started off like at the beginning of the film. But he said like the difference is that he now actually chose it for himself. So again, a big emphasis on like themes of like don't just like follow orders and like do what you want to do in life, like that makes you happy and stuff. So yeah, overall I would give the plot, I would say I'm gonna give it a 4 to 5. I like the plot. I think that it was pretty good, and yeah, just basically what I said up until this point. I thought it was a good plot. I liked it, I would say. So in terms of I have to, by the way, I just kind of quick side note, I do always wonder, like maybe after, like I usually, these reviews, I do the recap, and then it's like I say the plot, like, but then I always think like I need to say a bit extra of like why I rate the plot, what it was, but I'm thinking I don't really have to, because if I just gave a whole recap like of what the plot was about, me saying like, oh, I give it a 4 to 5, I liked it, that kind of basically just sums it up. Like, okay, this is what the plot was, and this was my thoughts on it. Like, I don't have to, like, I guess I could go into a bit more depth of like why I liked it and stuff, but I don't view it as like I always think like I don't have to, if I can't come up with anything on the spot, like I don't have to like try to dig to find something to justify my reasoning for why I like the plot or not. Just throwing that out there. But yeah, I like the plot. I thought that it was good. It was enjoyable. The beginning aspects. I'll say this. I did the middle aspect where it was just Z and Bala, they were together, just like exploring, adventuring through the outside world. That part was not as interesting as any of the stuff that happened within the ant colony, but still, I would say the plot was a 4 or 5. I would give it. I liked it. In terms of the characters, I think that Z was a pretty good main character. I did like, yeah, he was kind of like this very much a worker ant that's kind of like different from everyone else in the way he thinks, and he's like kind of, I guess, kind of. I don't want to say antisocial. It's like he is decently social. He's like very much kind of self-deprecating kind of character. Very, very much like, I don't really know how to describe him that really, but he's kind of like a more timid character. I want to say like very, very much like not strong. More of like a more talkative kind of character that's like weaker on the weaker side. Like the kind of like the opposite of the strong silent type. The talkative weaker kind of type. But I think that he was good. I did like him as the protagonist. I would say Princess Bala, she was good. I would say the relationship, I didn't really care for it too much, but I did appreciate that they kind of like it felt like an organic kind of relationship that developed, I guess. Weaver, the best friend of Z, I thought that he was pretty good, I would say. For some reason, I thought before going into this film, I thought he was voiced by Patrick Warburton, because he just does kind of look like a character that Patrick Warburton would voice, but he wasn't. But I still think that I think all the voice actors did a pretty good job, I would say. Mandible as the villain, he was good, I would say. Pretty just fine, standard, generic, not generic, I would say. Like his whole thing was just like, the weak should prosper and stuff. It's not like the most original thing ever, so I would say that a good villain, effective, but not one of my favorites, I would say. The Queen Antz, didn't care for her at all. Azteca, the love interest for Weaver, I thought that she was also good. The other worker ants and stuff, they were fine. The other bugs that are in the movie for a bit, the wasp and the other bugs that were in Insectopia, they were all right, I would say. Overall, the characters, I will go probably a 6 out of 10. I'll say above average, but yeah, just a 6 out of 10, I'm going to say. In terms of the settings, I really like the ant colony, the actual ant colony area. It does look, not even in terms of like how it looks, but how it's like kind of set up, where it's like you have like worker ants and this like world of the ant colony of like the worker ants, the soldier ants. I thought that it was pretty good. The actual, but like they have a bar area, like the areas where the ants sleep and stuff. Just it did feel pretty well developed, I would say. So in terms of the settings, I'm going to give the settings it doesn't look great. We'll get to that in a second with the visuals, but I would say the actual like the world that they built, I would say it was 7 out of 10. I'm going to say pretty good, I would say. In terms of the visuals, yeah, this is 1998. It is the first DreamWorks film, so definitely you got to cut them a bit of slack, because it is definitely not on the level that you got nowadays. The next video I'm going to do is A Bug's Life versus Antz comparison. That's going to be a review recommendation, so that will be interesting, on which I end up like. There's a bit of a charm to it, the fact that it's like the first DreamWorks film. It very much looks dated, but there is like a bit of a charm to it. So I am wondering which art style I will end up giving the point to, or maybe I'll give a point to both, but because that sometimes happens in the comparisons. But yeah, definitely the visuals, I'm going to probably give it, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10, because it's not good, but there is, again, a certain charm to it of like the first DreamWorks film, and like from the 1998. Like going into it, I didn't really remember how it looked. Like I remember how it looked, but I didn't really know how I would feel about it on rewatch, and I don't love it. at all. But again, it does have like a bit of a charm to it. It might be the nostalgia factor for me a bit more, but yeah, definitely I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. I'm going to say not good, but not bad, I would say. In terms of the comedy, yeah, so in a lot of like recent reviews, I have been kind of a bit more lax on the genre category, where it's like if I didn't really have anything necessarily to speak about for either the comedy or maybe the action aspects, then I just wouldn't rate the film on those aspects, because I am just in the genre specific categories. I feel like it's fine if I'm a bit more lax. If it's like there's a film that is kind of considered a comedy, but I wouldn't necessarily like the comedy itself isn't going to help like raise the score, and it would just end up being like somewhere in the middle, then I just don't bother rating it. Like I'm kind of being more lax on what I'm on me rating it. Like I'm not going to necessarily care about rating it in terms of specific genre categories, specifically comedy, if the film is not like explicitly a comedy. This film also is not explicitly a comedy, but I would say the comedy was decent enough where I would rate it something that's like not a, I don't know, if I'm just going to end up rating it a 5 out of 10, then I don't really feel like including the comedy category. But this film, I would say the comedy, it wasn't great, honestly. I don't. Yeah, it was fine, but I guess I don't know. Again, I'm like picking and choosing kind of what films I decide to rate in the comedy. In this film, I do feel like rating it in terms of the comedy aspects, and I feel like most of the comedy probably just comes from the way that Z talks, like his kind of is the lines and his dialogue. I would give it probably. I'll say the comedy was like decent. I'll say like a 5.5. Like nothing really. I think there were a few moments where I laughed out loud, but nothing was really extremely like hilarious, and there's not really a lot of memorable jokes. But I would say that Z did have some good dialogue, so I'll go a 5.5 for Z's dialogue, I guess. In terms of the worst thing was probably just a lot of the stuff that happened outside of the actual ant colony, again with Z and Bala's journey, like for going from the ant hill to where they go. They went to a lake area, I'm pretty sure, to a picnic area, to not a lake area, but like just an area with some water, to a picnic area, to Insectopia. It wasn't the best. I didn't really. It was probably my least favorite part of the film. Those areas, I would say, it was good. Like there were good moments, like the moments of like the picnic, where the moment where Z ends up going on like the human's shoe, and you got some like nice camera work, I guess, of not necessarily camera work, but just seeing like, I don't know, it was a cool scene of having like Z on top of the shoe that was moving. I thought that was like pretty creative, I would say. So like the way that the ants interact with their environment, I thought was pretty decent, but the actual outside areas and that journey section of the film, I just didn't care for as much. So I'm going to give those parts, they weren't bad, so I'm just going to give it like a 5 out of 10. I would say not good, not bad for those scenes, but yeah. And I guess you could also reuse the visuals, which I also gave a 5 out of 10 to, so 5 out of 10 for, but it's mostly for the journey aspects, so yeah, 5 out of 10 for those. In terms of the best thing I'll reuse, I would say, yeah, I'll reuse the plot. I'll say just another 4 to 5 for the plot, because it was I like the plot, and so just another 4 to 5 for the plot. Here, there are some extra notes I wrote down. I did like the music. I have to start remembering, like, for a while I was kind of thinking, like, maybe I just shouldn't talk about the music because I should save it to speak about at the end of the year when I do the media music ranking. But I decided I do still want to mention. I want to mention in the reviews, like if there is music worth mentioning, I do want to mention that the music was good, and I did like the music of this film. The soundtrack did sound pretty good, I would say. Not even just the soundtrack, but also like at the end the credits, when the credits are rolling, the music there I thought was pretty good as well. So definitely shout out to the music. There was a lot more cursing. This is supposed to be a kids film, but they say hell, which is like not. It's pretty tame for like I've seen kids films that they say hell, but they said bitching, which I was not expecting, because I did think that seems a bit crass for a kids film. There's a scene where I think Z is saying something to Princess Ball of how he's like he was gonna let her into his erotic fantasies. Like he actually used that term verbatim. So yeah, that I wasn't expecting them to use like that. Like that these phrases and stuff, and like they say like ass and damn, which again, like I've heard that in kids films before, but specifically bitching in the erotic fantasies dialogue, I thought that was just surprising. I wasn't expecting that in a kids film. So the water in the third act, there was like this whole rush of water that came in that was like flooding the area that the ants were trapped in, and they did the incorrect timing trope where it did feel like the water should be rising much faster than it actually was. So just wanted to point that out, because I was thinking about it while watching. I was like, okay, there's no way that they actually have time to, like, some of the ants at the very bottom of the ladder would have drowned by now. So yeah, anyway, that is all of the extra notes that I have, so I'm going to do the calculations. So King Crimson. Alright, so it ends up coming out to about a 6.5, which would be good, but honestly, I think I might even give it a bit higher than that. I think I would probably go between like a 6.5 to a 7, I would say. And I think I'm going to... I'm not gonna give a concrete score. I'm just gonna call it between a 6.5 to a 7. I thought it was between good and pretty good, I would say. And so yeah, honestly, going into it, I didn't really know what my expectation. I thought it would be fine. I thought it would probably be at least decent. But yeah, I think it did pretty much surpass my expectations from what I remembered. And so I was probably better on rewatch, I would say. So yeah, I'm going to call it between a 6.5 to a 7. If I let marinate longer, I would probably give a more concrete score. But for now, I'm just going to call it between a 6.5 to a 7, between good and pretty good. So yeah, that is pretty much all there is to it. So if you have any recommendations, any shows, movies, video game stories, anime, manga, web series, anything that you want me to review, leave it in the comments and I will maybe possibly check it out. With that said, that is pretty much all there is to it. So let's leave it at that.